morning to you, and I'm glad that you have found time to be with us this morning, just a few minutes past 11 a.m. here in Nairobi, East African time. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and watching us from. The show is Unfiltered. I'll bring you the stories that have made headlines across the week, and of course, some of these stories are developing stories, so they continue to make headlines. But before we get into the detailed news brief, I'd like us to just look at the headlines of some leading newspapers from across the continent and others from outside. We start with the Kenyan newspapers. The People Daily, budget of promises. That is what we have then. Pastor Ezekiel's arrest over cult links leaves his allies in a bind. The Daily Nation, Raila returns to Ruto checkmate. Game plan opposition leader Raila Odinga flies back to the country today for a grand rally to address the political crisis that deepened after bipartisan talks stalled, even as President Ruto swiftly evacuated a counter strategy to counter him. Not evacuated, executed. That story is on page 7. Pastor Ezekiel arrested as police probe cult deaths. That also is a headline then. Households, tea farmers reap big in 3.5 trillion Kenya shillings budget. The Star newspaper, Kenyatta Family Bank hit as KRA demands $1 billion. Treasury revokes tax waiver extended to NIC and CBA banks in 2019 merger. And then Pastor Ezekiel arrested for suspected deaths. Budget, state cuts borrowing plans to raise 3.6 trillion Kenya shillings. And why Malindi family evicted Mackenzie from their property. Ruto raids Azimio as state accused of killing parties. The Standard newspaper, another cleric probed over mass deaths. That is what we have there. And some of the newspapers from across other countries. We start Zimbabwe. We want to see Zimbabwe succeeding. That is the main headline on the Daily News there. London reiterates as it recommits to assisting Harare. It's interesting that London would say it wants to see Zimbabwe succeeding, while London has been the source of all these problems. I'm not saying it is solely responsible, but it plays a huge role to what has become of Zimbabwe today. And these sanctions and all of these things that they continue doing together with its allies in the Western world has haunts Zimbabwe and suffocates Zimbabwe. But now they want to see Zimbabwe succeed. Quite something there, isn't it? Trading in US dollars only is unlawful. Okay, the Herald as well from Zimbabwe, King Mswati the third calls for removal of sanctions against Zimbabwe, I guess. Embrace technology to spur Africa's economic growth. I think we talked about that yesterday. The Nation from Nigeria, why Tinubu floored Atiku Obi by President Buhari. And mixed reactions trail subsidy removal shift. 48 million barrel of crude oil not missing, Malawi tells representatives. Southwest states to launch regional power rail projects. Buhari, we have done our best to improve security. Okay, with all due respect, sir, have a seat, several seats. This day, from Nigeria as well, Buhari overconfidence, bad tactical moves killed opposition at polls. And then NEC pushes federal government to suspend planned fuel subsidy removal. The Daily Trust as well from Nigeria, Tinubu settles for Akpa Bio and Barrow as Senate President. All right, Sudan crisis, 1,500 Nigerian evacuees to arrive today in Abuja, as according to the federal government. Daily Monitor, MPs, that is from Uganda. MPs blow off America in anti-gay law battle. A section of the legislators say Washington should continue supporting HIV and AIDS care and treatment if the assistance was, altruistic, but withdraw the money if the purpose was to push homosexuality agenda. Okay, so I don't know if Uganda will be able to support this HIV and AIDS-free medication that we know USAID through the United States has been providing to a lot of African countries, and that's why the patients are able to access these drugs for free, this medication and also TB medication, which is free. But there's nothing really for free. If you're receiving something for free, there's somebody else who is really incurring the cost, and so that has been one of the things, and how our US has been collaborating with Africa. But also that has always come with a cost, and that's why sometimes even on things we might not really agree with them, a lot of times we are forced to dance to their tune. That is just part of diplomacy. It's, this medication and health and help and all these grants, they're just used as tools of diplomacy. And at the end of the day, a country is able to work and reach its goals as far as foreign policy is concerned, because that usually is the bigger picture. And so Ugandan, after the passing, they've not passed, but they were debating this, and then it was taken to President Museveni. It was brought back because of a few clauses. I think they need to work on this anti-homosexuality bill. And so they're now saying if that is the price that they have to pay, that Uganda has to agree with some of these things, as far as this community is concerned, then they'd better take away their help, the support that they've been giving in the HIV and AIDS care sector. Uganda, you can't afford this. You can't. Otherwise, you would have been doing that yourself. Can you afford for, I don't know how many people receive this treatment or are in need of this service in Uganda? I don't have the statistics, but I'm sure it's quite a number. So I don't know if as a country you are able to provide this for your people. Are you able to do that? Okay. So I'll just be here reporting to you what happens in this story. And for that reason, let me just move on to the new times from Rwanda. Refugees quiz diplomats on terrible DR Congo crisis. For decades, the UN has been accused of turning a blind eye on the prosecution of DR Congo's Rwanda funds. See, the stories on page 3. Okay, this is the New Times. It is a Rwandan newspaper. So obviously they will tell the story from the Rwandan perspective. I'm not saying it's wrong, because there has been some substantial evidence that indeed this community, which have a Rwandan tie, what's the name? I'm forgetting the right name in my head. I can't say it right. So there is evidence that this community or this ethnic tribe has been unfairly targeted in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the government has done nothing to address that. The government of DR has done nothing to address this issue. So, it is something that also has inspired the strengthening of the M23 rebel groups, because part of what they're fighting for in the Democratic Republic of Congo is the recognition of these ethnic Tutsis in DRC, and also just equality in all ways, among other things that they're fighting for. But that is at the heart of the reason why they're fighting. But if you dig deeper, there are many other reasons and causes of that conflict, and that is just perhaps something that they're using as a scapegoat. But it is a very important issue there as far as that conflict is concerned. The citizen from Tanzania. Tanzania's bold rescue mission of its citizens from Khartoum. There were emotional scenes at Julius Nyerere International Airport in Dar es Salaam yesterday when more than 200 Tanzanians arrived home from conflict-hit Sudan following an evacuation organized and coordinated by the government. Okay. Kagame arrives for a 2-day working visit. I told you about that yesterday. I haven't heard much from this meeting. He arrived yesterday in Tanzania. I've tried looking through and see any details of that meeting. Not yet, but I'm sure in the course of the day that might come out. Why Samia picked private sector gurus for malaria initiative. I think that is the way to go. What should be done to promote SMEs? Also, that is there. And Tanzania, Japan sign 172 billion Tanzania shillings pact on farming inputs. The Namibian, it sounded like AK-47s. That is the main headline there. And then Parliament agrees to investigate tender awarding processes, also in the Namibian. The Sun, also the Namibian. Drunk man bludgeons mother to death. Okay, that is sad. Namibia's ICC membership under constant scrutiny. Why is that? And then Finland wants green hydrogen. Namibia wants trade. Okay, so I guess they will find a way to work through that, I suppose. And some newspapers from the UK, the Daily Mail. Her Royal Highness Kate all smiles as she bounces her way down Welsh Cliff. They claim to be champions of the workers, but rail unions plan to cause misery for thousands by cynically targeting the FA Cup final, the Derby, and the Eurovision in Liverpool. The rail workers are going on strike at a very important time in the calendar of football. So, according to this story, they don't love people very much. If this is the time they're choosing to go on strike, and it will, affect all these football lovers. And England, they have, it's like the core of the of course, not just England, but Germany, Spain, and these other countries in Europe. They really love soccer or football, and so these the railway workers, chose not a very good time to go on strike, because this will affect the movement of fans from one stadium to the other to go enjoy this match. So that is what they're saying. So they're saying that is being vindictive. These railway workers are being vindictive. These railway workers are just fighting for a better pay. And if you want to bargain, you have to look at the right time. The timing is everything, and this is the right time, and the government will feel it. Of course, the people also will feel it, and so the message will arrive at home in good time. So that's why they choose this time. It will have maximum effect. The strike will be felt, okay, because perhaps they've been going on strike and talking and these negotiations, and the government has not been trying to pay attention to what they've been saying. So they chose the right time, and which might be vindictive if you are looking at it from the other side, but according to that headline, but that's how that goes. So hopefully a resolution will be reached soon, so that football fans and other people there in Britain don't get to suffer so much. The Daily Telegraph. My place in coronation proves king embraces diversity. Benjamin praises role in event as monarch names an electric and diverse procession. That's interesting. Is it okay? Right. BBC chairman Sharp breached rules over Johnson loan. And then the Times, also from the UK, the funniest couple on TV and their dog. Okay. BBC chairman braces for results of Dunning investigation, gambling cabs to save young from addiction, and of course the photo of Kate Middleton there. I think she was hiking. That is news. British tabloid. Daily Mirror, please help us. The Forgotten Mine, drought victims tell of heartbreaking horror. This is in East Africa. What country is this? Okay. That is disturbing. Now, the Daily Express, but it is the unfortunately the reality in some parts, even in Kenya and Somalia and some other parts. So, yeah. The Daily Express, just how cynical can rail unions be? Okay. Legendary TV host Jerry Springer dies aged 79. Okay. They refer to him as the founder of trash TV, but, offered a lot of entertainment to so many. News, NHS doctors stranded in Sudan after UK refuses airlift. And then The Guardian, Grants claim actor says son bungled flat to gain private information. And Watchdog, Met may be failing to spot serial killers. Delays to crack down on gambling will cost lives, and King Charles' family linked to slavery revealed. Now, those are the kinds of stories I like to hear. Probably go look for that and read more. Then I'll come talk to you about it here next time. USA Daily, kids' surgery is no fun, but now it can be easier. Okay, and House passes GOP debt limit plan. And at Vatican, a crack in stained glass ceiling. Okay. And then we look at, which one is this? The New York Times. In India, it is their time for the big dreams. I think this one, I don't know if it's from yesterday or today. Okay, so Newsday, key step toward 4 billion casino at Coliseum site. We have that, and then I think that is all we have from some parts of Africa, from the UK, and also from the US. And of course, we did start with the leading newspapers from here in Kenya. So now you're now up to date. So now let's just get into a detailed bulletin. And as usual, we shall start with a leading story in the continent. That is from Sudan. And the rival faction of Sudan's military have agreed to renew a 3-day ceasefire shortly before it was due to expire, the extension for another 72 hours following intensive diplomatic efforts by neighboring countries as well as the US, UK and UN. But there are continuing reports of heavy fighting in the capital, Khartoum. The previous truce allowed thousands of people to attempt to flee for safety, while dozens of countries have tried to evacuate their citizens. Almost 2 weeks of fighting between the army and a rival paramilitary group have left hundreds dead. The ceasefire had been expected to end at midnight local time earlier on Thursday evening, and Sudanese regular army agreed to an extension, and its rival, the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, followed suit hours later. South Sudan has offered to host peace talks, and the army has agreed to send representatives to the talks. The U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said Washington was very actively working to extend the truce, adding that while imperfect, it had reduced violence. But White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre later said the situation could worsen at any moment. Meanwhile, the RSF eyewitnesses say the army had been pounding its positions in Khartoum. The foreign minister in the civilian government, Mariam Al-Sadiq Al-Mahdi, told the BBC from her home in Khartoum that despite the ceasefire, civilians were still living in fear. And still staying with the issues from Sudan, the UN Refugee Agency is appealing to Sudan's neighbors to keep their borders open to people fleeing the fighting that erupted on April the 15th. Since fighting between the Sudanese army and paramilitary Rapid Support Forces erupted, tens of thousands of Sudanese have left their homes fearing for their lives. UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi echoed repeated calls made by the United Nations Secretary General for hostilities to stop immediately and for all parties to embark on meaningful peace efforts. Despite an extension of the latest ceasefire between the warring parties, fighting was reported in Khartoum and the Western Darfur region on Thursday. The UN's acting resident and humanitarian coordinator in Sudan, Adu Ndeng, told reporters by phone Thursday that efforts were being made from many quarters to extend the temporary ceasefire and acknowledged the fighting was going on despite it. Despite the ongoing violence in Sudan, a team of Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, has so far donated medical supplies to 3 health facilities in the capital Khartoum. According to Thursday's statement from the organization, one donation delivery took place on Thursday amid the violence. We head over to Burkina Faso. Suspected Islamist militants have killed 33 soldiers in northeast Burkina Faso during an attack on a military post, the army said in a statement. It is the second such attack in just over a week in which dozens of soldiers have been reported killed. The military-led government in the capital Ouagadougou spoke for the first time on Thursday about last week's killing of over 100 civilians by what local officials describe as men in military uniform. The government has not said whether the attack on the northwestern village of Khama was carried out by the army, but it called for full investigation. Non-governmental organizations say 10,000 civilians and soldiers have been killed in the long-running insurgency, and attacks have sharply increased since the start of this year. Head over to Nigeria, and the country has suspended the planned removal of subsidies on petroleum products by June this year, saying it was not a favorable time for the action. Nigeria's Finance Minister Zainab Ahmed said the council would continue talks with the incoming administration. President-elect Bola Tinubu plans to stop subsidy payments once he assumes office in May this year. Earlier this month, the federal government secured $800 million in grants from the World Bank to scale up its national social program ahead of removing its petroleum subsidies in mid-2023. aimed at reducing the impact of fuel subsidy removal. Africa's biggest economy set aside 3.36 trillion naira, that is equivalent to 7.3 billion US dollars this year, to spend on petroleum subsidies until mid-year 2023, when it will cease payments. Nigeria is one of Africa's largest crude oil producers, but imports petroleum products due to malfunctioning refineries. So which one is cheaper? Will it not be cheaper for them to make sure that these refineries work and just invest in that in the long run? I think it will make a lot of financial sense, but what do I know? I think, importing the petroleum creates room for a lot of things that will benefit the people who are meant to benefit. All right, let's go to Ethiopia. At the head of the ruling Prosperity Party in Ethiopia's Amara region has been shot dead, along with his security detail. The authorities have said Gedma Yeshitla was returning from an official trip when he was ambushed some 250 kilometers north of the capital, Addis Ababa. According to a statement released by the region's communications office, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed called the killing shameful and horrible and blamed it on unnamed violent extremists who he said chose to settle differences through guns rather than dialogue. The killing came weeks after the federal government announced the dissolution of a paramilitary force, which had triggered widespread protest and violence in Amara. Mr. Girma faced strong criticism from opponents of the office dissolution, who saw him as one of the faces behind the move. The killing of a senior politician is not new in Amara. 2019, the regional leader and other top officials were killed in what was described as a failed regional coup attempt. And in Mozambique, President Filipe Nyusi assured on Wednesday that the conditions are met to allow Total Energies to resume its huge natural gas exploitation project in the country that was suspended since 2021 following a major jihadist attack a few kilometers away. The poor but resource-rich northeastern province of Cabo Delgado, which has a Muslim majority and borders Tanzania, has been plagued by violence from armed groups since late 2017. Nearly 4,700 people have been already killed, including more than 2,000 civilians. 1 million have been forced from their homes. At the end of March 2021, a coordinated attack on the coastal town of Palma forced the French group to suspend a 16.5 billion euro natural gas development project until further notice. Facilities still under construction on the Afungi Peninsula were evacuated. Total Energies has been cautious for several months about the possibilities of restarting its operations in Mozambique. Its CEO, Patrick Pouyan, visited the country in February and held talks with the Mozambican president. Last month, the French giant's Italian subcontractor Saipem announced preparations to resume work, saying it had been informed that safety has since improved. And in the DRC, 1 month since rebels closed in on Drodro village in eastern Congo, the once bustling wards of its hospitals are empty, and the corridors are darkened, and the patients are not allowed to go there anymore. Now, the community is one of the many Ituri provinces in Jugu territory that has seen a surge in attacks by the Cooperative for the Development of the Congo armed group Codeco, with about 550,000 people forced to flee their homes between January and March. That is according to United Nations data. And Samire, which is one of the doctors, is a member of the Hima Hadi community, started to abandon Drodro in mid-March ahead of the rumored advance by the Codeco. The group, which claims to defend the interests of the Lendu farmers who have long been in conflict with the Hima Hadas, is one of the dozens of militias that have destabilized the eastern DRC since the 1990s. Most Hima locals have left by March the 22nd, when Codeco fighters took up positions on the hillside of Drodro in broad daylight. The doctor said that the Codeco raids have worsened a long-standing humanitarian crisis in Ituri province, where 3 million people desperately need aid, according to the UN humanitarian agency. And in further afield, Mali and its neighbor Algeria on Thursday said they wished to revive a 2015 peace deal between Bamako and northern Malian rebels that today lies in limbo, raising fears of renewed violence. The pact aimed at easing tensions in a region that exploded into violence in 2012 with ethnic Tuaregs mounted an insurgency against the central government. Jihadists joined the revolt and later took their campaign into central Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso, killing thousands of people across the region and forcing millions to flee their homes. The 2015 agreement brought together the Tuareg rebels and the state in an accord that offered more local autonomy and the chance to integrate fighters into a state-run, reconstituted army that would operate in the region. But the agreement has only been partially implemented, and the rebels have angrily declared they are suspending the participation in it. In a joint statement on Thursday, Mali and Algeria said they wanted to relaunch the deal. And this is after Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Stav held talks with the Burkina Faso's junta leader Assimi Goita, not Mali, junta Assimi Goita. His visit came after former Malian rebels went to Algeria in February for talks on how to end the impasse. A leading rebel group that signed the 2015 agreement reacted caustically to prospects of getting their code back on track. The Islamic State in the Great Sahara Group has been gaining ground in the northern Mali against a desperate constellation of rivals. The Al-Qaeda-linked support group of Islam and Muslims, government troops and local Tuareg-dominated armed groups. And back to Kenya. The High Court in Nairobi has ruled that assets of Felician Kabuga, a Rwandan tycoon suspected of financing the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis, remain frozen until a United Nations court concludes its trial. Justice Esther Miner on Thursday declared a request by Kabuga's family to lift court orders issued on May 6, 2008, preserving Mr. Kabuga's house in Nairobi. Mr. Kabuga was a fugitive at that time. He was arrested in May 2020 near Paris by French authorities and is currently at The Hague fighting charges related to genocide against the Tutsi. The registered owners of the property in Nairobi are Kabuga and his wife, Mukazitoni Josephine, who died in 2017 in Belgium. Justice Maina endorsed the 2008 preservation orders issued by Judge Muga Apondi, who's now retired, meaning the rent income will continue being deposited in a government account. The property was frozen following an application by Kenya's Attorney General, who was enforcing resolutions for member states of the United Nations to assist in tracing suspects in the cases of Rwandan genocide against the Tutsis. According to the order, all rental income or proceeds collected by the managing agent will be deposited to the Registrar of the High Court of Kenya until the conclusion of Kabuga's case at the UN Tribunal. Kabuga's wife, in a response filed in court before her death, argued the Kenyan government had not proven the property was acquired through process of crime or was unlawfully acquired. She had also argued that there was no proof that Kabuga used the income generated from the property to avoid arrest and interfere with the prosecution's witnesses. Kabuga, an 87-year-old businessman and former radio station owner, is currently on trial before a United Nations trial at the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands over accusations of financing and promoting mass killings in Rwanda in 1994. We head over back to Sudan. Sudan's warring factions on Thursday night agreed on a new ceasefire extending respite for battered civilians by another 72 hours. The decision by the Sudan Armed Forces, led by Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his rival Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo alias Hemeti of the Rapid Support Forces, came following intense pressure from regional leaders under the African Union, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development (IGAD), the United Nations, the US, Gulf countries and various other entities who have called for an urgent de-escalation. A statement issued on Friday morning by the Trilateral Mechanism on Sudan's transition, which included the AU, IGAD, the UN and the Quad. We have the Quad now. And this is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, UK and US. That is the Quad, okay? These alliances are something else. On Sudan, said that ceasefire will now extend to the end of the month. On Wednesday, IGAD leaders led by South Sudan's President Salva Kiir invited the two generals for dialogue. Sources indicated only al-Burhan had the willingness to attend, but the RSF blamed him for continual violence. And the Sudanese Foreign Ministry, still in Sudan as we end, Sudanese Foreign Ministry says it had filed a complaint with the World Health Organization regarding the occupation of hospitals by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, the state-run Sudanese agency has reported. The ministry said RSF had occupied 12 hospitals in the capital Khartoum, a gross violation of international humanitarian law, rules of engagement, and international human rights law that protect the sanctity of these facilities. Several hospitals have reportedly destroyed by the bombings. The army accuses RSF fighters of using residential areas and healthcare facilities and hiding places and using civilians as human shields. The RSF has not responded to the allegations but has earlier accused the Air Force of indiscriminately bombing hospitals and the residential areas. At least 512 people have been killed so far, 4,193 injured in the continuing fighting between RSF and the army since the 15th of April. That was a lot, but you are now up to date. Those are the leading stories from Africa. This morning, 35 minutes past 11 a.m. here in Nairobi, East African time. I trust that your day has started off well. Good afternoon, good evening, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us today. Now, of course, the RSF, as much as what they're doing is completely out of order and goes against the international law. I don't know why they've taken I don't know why. I think because they'll use the civilians as human shields. So absolutely, that is the reason why they've taken a shield in these hospitals. But this is not okay. And now it makes sense why we've had reports of, even the last time we were having this conversation, I was reporting to you that from Sudan, many hospitals had been destroyed. And now the reason is emerging is because this is where the paramilitary RSF goes to shield itself because it knows as long as it is within the civilian community, then the army might not really attack these places, but the army attacks these places anyway. So that has resulted to a destruction of a lot of such facilities, health facilities and other facilities there in Sudan. And now the Sudan Foreign Ministry is writing to World Health Organization and informing them that, tell RSF to stop occupying hospitals. Tell RSF to go find other strategic areas to hide and where they can fight the government, the army, the National Army of Sudan properly, but without involving the civilians. I don't know, this is something that the RSF will pay attention to, but I'm sure the international community is paying attention to, and certainly I think the ICC is paying attention to this. And there's still a case there on ICC, Sudan, and these generals, some of them could feature very well in that case. So I guess the ICC now, the prosecutor, is just sitting there taking notes and collecting data and collecting evidence. In fact, this will be so easier for the ICC as they continue building up their case, or I guess they will add this to whatever case that is on Sudan there. So these are things that will amount to those threshold that meets the necessity for ICC to start a case, or to continue that case, or to prosecute. So ICC is paying attention, and the RSF is being accused of taking shield in hospitals. It is taking shield in hospitals and other areas, residential areas, and I think that is why you see a lot of destruction in the city, because in the effort of the army following them and fighting with them, these people, the RSF end up hiding where people are, and so the army, I guess, in its thinking, because they must fight this RSF despite of the casualties and the number of people who will be affected, so they fight them anyway. I don't know which side even makes sense. The fact that the army would still fight the RSF, even with them hiding in hospital where civilians are, and where there's a huge risk as far as the casualties, but the army will fight them anyway. Or the RSF who have decided to use these civilians as human shields as they fight the army and they retreat back to this human shield. So which side is lesser evil in this case? Because they're all doing the same thing. They're all putting the lives of these people in danger, the RSF and the army. So if the Sudan Foreign Ministry could be writing these statements to the World Health Organization and maybe say, because they're hiding and they're using the people as human shields, and so the army cannot fight them effectively, and so the army hasn't fought them, hasn't attacked them because of where they've taken refuge, this RSF, then, maybe. But the army is fighting them anyway, despite the fact that they're running and taking shield and being among the people and putting the civilians' lives at risk. The army is still fighting them, is still following them, because they're also fighting the army back. So they're all at a fault. So while you write, the Sudan Foreign Ministry is writing to the World Health Organization to ask, to plead with RSF to stop going to these areas where it's finding human shield, then the army also should operate within the discipline that we know the armed forces to have. And one of the responsibilities, because RSF is a paramilitary group, but you are the National Army of Sudan. You, Al Burhan, have a responsibility to protect the lives of the people of Sudan. It is dicey, it is difficult because of the conditions around this conflict, but you still have the sole responsibility to ensure the lives. Right now, we're not even looking at property because I think that is secondary. But the sanctity of the lives of the people of Sudan is preserved and is protected. That is a responsibility you have, not the paramilitary. They're responsible, and I think a time will come where we'll have accountability after you guys are done with this madness. But you have the responsibility. I don't want to say according to the Constitution because you suspended the Constitution. But according to whatever it is that you're working with, the working document that you're using, and the international law, and the code of conduct of the army, you as the disciplined forces, that one is a militia. Remember, it is the former Janjaweed. It is a paramilitary. So what you expect from them is different. But even with them, they do have the responsibility of making sure that the civilians are protected. But you see how they're moving and the places they choose to go hide. So that is not even in their agenda. But you, on the other hand, you are responsible and you will be answerable because that is your mandate. That is your responsibility to protect the lives of the people of Sudan. So even as these RSF find their ways into areas where civilians are, I think you must engage in a way that there is minimum damage to the civilians who have been caught up in this war conflict that has nothing to do with them, that it's not even their fault because of the power struggles and other interests that are very much present and represented in this conflict. So whatever you do, the army of South Sudan, not South Sudan, even that army has a responsibility, but the army of Sudan, you do have the sole responsibility of ensuring the lives of the people of Sudan is protected, the sanctity of life as prescribed at the United Nations Charter, that you are a member. You have a responsibility, and you're going to be very much answerable because that is your job, that is your duty. That is your job as an army, and that is your job as a government, because now you're in charge of the government. And as the army, that is your first responsibility, protection of lives and the country. So if you are participating in the killing of these civilians, whether by mistake or whatever it is, then that is a problem, and you will be answerable. And Karim Khan is just writing down his notes. ISIS is just watching. So also be prepared after that, because this, as long as it continues like this, will also find its way there added to the the existing case there at the International Criminal Court. So anyway, a ceasefire was, they agreed to extend the ceasefire. And I think there's a story I started with. I don't know if I don't know if, let me see. There you go. So there is an extension of another 72 hours. This followed an intervention by efforts from neighboring countries, including Kenya, as well as the US, the UK, and the UN. But even as the new extension of the ceasefire, first of all, this extension of the ceasefire, even the other one was violated. But even with this new one, there's still heavy fighting being reported in the capital Khartoum, and people are still trying to flee to safety as we speak right now. So earlier on Thursday evening, the Sudanese regular army agreed to an extension, and its rival, the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, followed suit hours later. So they've all agreed to an extension of a ceasefire. I don't know why we are calling it extension, because even that one did not really hold. But let's just go with the wordings here. So they've all agreed to an extension of ceasefire for another 72 hours. Both the army and the paramilitary group, this RSF, they've agreed. But even with that, just a few moments ago, heavy fighting is still being reported in Khartoum, and the RSF has constantly blamed the army of violating these ceasefires. It's the army, according to the RSF and other eyewitnesses that have spoken to media houses like the BBC and CNN and others. They are saying these attacks are by the National Army, targeting, of course, areas that RSF are. And as I have explained there before, RSF is taking shield and it's hiding. Its soldiers are hiding. It's choosing strategic places where people are and hospitals. And now they've occupied hospitals that, when a war breaks, there are specific places people will run to instinctively, hoping that they will be safer there. That includes hospitals, churches, mosques, and these areas that in war, in a conflict, it is expected that someone will see some sense and not infiltrate these areas and not go attacking people who have taken cover under this area. So there are certain areas where people, even during conflict, and you don't expect, that the fighting, the actors in a conflict would access. But that is not the case. So I guess many people might have ran to take shield in these hospitals, and so RSF followed there, and the government forces are up in there fighting them, so putting their lives at risks. So the fighting is continuing even despite the extended and the renewed 3-day ceasefire. So they're still fighting. RSF eyewitnesses have said that the army has been pounding its positions in Khartoum. So that has been ongoing. What the foreign minister in the civilian government, Marianne, I think I've said that. What they said that what they call a truce has nothing to do with what is happening. She said in one of the programs on the BBC, the bombardment by the aeroplanes is taking place almost all day and night. So she is a foreign minister in the civilian government, on the other side of the civilian, Marian Al-Sadiq, and she is in Khartoum. And she's saying, this truce is not holding because the bombardments continue by aeroplanes. It is taking place all day and all night. So in short, this ceasefire is not working, is not holding at all. I'll leave that Kabuga story alone, and I'll just move over to, let me see, something else that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, something else that I wanted us to talk about. Oh no, I think this is interesting, the story between Mali and Algeria, and they've recommitted to 2015 Malian Peace Pact. And it is interesting because we know Algeria has fallen out with France, and Mali has also fallen out with France, it's the former colony, right? So Mali and its neighbor Algeria on Thursday said they wish to revive a 2015 peace deal between Bamako and northern Malian rebels that today lies in limbo, raising fears of renewed violence. So Mali is saying that it wants to there's a truce that was signed in some years back in 2015, and because of Mali's government negating on its agreement and what it had agreed as part of this agreement that saw a renewed violence. And so must be Algeria's intervention here, because Tuaregs, these Tuaregs that have occupied the northern part of Mali, they also do have some history in Algeria. There's a war that happened in Algeria in the early 1990s that saw, as part of these Tuaregs, that others spilled over to the northern part of Mali. I'll take my time and explain this some other time, not today, but I'm just trying to give us just a bit of some background history so that we understand why this is important and the links between it. Hopefully, I have the details right. And so they came in to northern part of Mali and some parts of Libya as well. And of course, the former president of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, used the Tuaregs a lot to carry out his dirty works. So after he was disposed, they now came back and regrouped in Mali. After the war that happened in Algeria in the 90s, that the Tuaregs really participated in that. It's another thing. So anyway, Mali and its neighbor Algeria have agreed to revive this pact. And this pact was between Bamako and northern Malian rebels. Now Mali is divided into two parts, not geographically, but according to their politics, according to their socialization, according to the administration of the country, according to their way of life. Subconsciously. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it has been the country has divided itself into two parts. You have the northern part where the Tuaregs and other maybe 3-4 communities feel the government has neglected them, and in the northern part there are communities that perhaps people don't go to school well or things like that. And then in the southern part where the elites are, so even government positions and all these things and the administration of the government and all these things that involves the day-to-day running of the government is found on the southern part. So the people from the southern part of Mali always look at the people from the north as being very problematic. And the people from the north have always felt they have been marginalized by the elites in the south. Okay? If at all that even makes sense. But that is how they have divided themselves, not geographically, but according to these other factors. So that has formed a very rife ground for the rebellious activities and for the extremist activities we see from the north that are led by this Tuareg community and others also. Think about 3 or 4 of them that have joined forces to fight the government of these elites from the south. Mali is majority a Muslim country. Mali is 96% Muslim country. But majority of Malians, especially from the south, wants a more moderate Islam country, a more liberal, a more accommodative, a more modern, a liberal society, as much as there are Muslims. But from the north, they want the extremist version of practice of Islam and of running of the country, as you see in perhaps Saudi Arabia and these other Gulf countries. So also religion and I think culture also is also in there. So that is the divide, and that is just part of what they have been fighting. And of course, being an ideological war as well, we have the issues of Western education, we have the issues of Western democracy and all that. They don't believe that in Mali there should be any kind of elections and all that. In fact, the uprising that removed saw the army remove Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. Remember the president of Mali who was disposed from power, went to the UAE. I think he died there earlier last year. Is it last year or the other year? I think earlier January last year. They removed him, and before that, the presidents who had come before him who were also disposed. And they don't believe in this Western form of democracy, so they're fighting that. So it's a cocktail of a lot of things, and lo and behold, France was also in the middle of that mess. The president that was before Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta had invited France to come and help quell this extremism activities and this rebellion that was coming from the north, that was coming very close to the capital, and they had taken over several small towns and villages in that part. And so France came, and France did a fantastic job initially in helping the government of Mali at that time to fight these extremist groups. But then France overstayed, so that is also another conversation for another time. So now that these two countries, the reason why I'm saying all this is I'm trying to tie this, now the coming together of Mali, who has severed ties with France, and Algeria, who has severed ties in the most, way with France as well, okay? And now they're coming together, and Mali wants to renew their talks with this Tuareg group from the northern part of the country. The pact aimed at easing tensions in a region that exploded into violence in 2012 when the ethnic Tuaregs mounted an insurgency against the central government. Jihadists joined the revolt and later took the campaign into central Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. So it's not just a Mali thing, but that spread in other neighboring countries, killing thousands of groups and of people across the region and forcing millions to flee their homes. Now, in 2015, agreement brought together the Tuareg rebels and the state in an accord that offered more local autonomy and the chance to integrate fighters into the state-run, reconstituted army. I have a problem with having these insurgencies or these fighters or these militias or this extremism, whatever it is, and whatever, in whichever country. And one of the things they want or they demand is to be integrated in the army. Why can't they be given other things to do? Why are they always wanting to get into the army? And they are militias. They're not an army. They don't have the army ethics. They don't have the army mentality. But one of the things that they've always wanted, not just these Tuareg rebels from Mali, but even others from, we saw the M23, that's what they're fighting for in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Which other country? With several others. And that is just one of the demands they make. They want to be reintegrated back. This RSF here in Sudan, that is one of the things that made them fall out with the army. They want to be reintegrated to the army. No, they shouldn't. So these Tuareg rebels, these extremist groups, also one of the things that they've been wanting as part of the agreement, and I think that is why this agreement fell apart, is they want their fighters. These are fighters. These are militias. These are killers to be integrated into the national army. But the agreement has only been partially implemented, and the rebels have angrily declared they are suspending participation in it. So in a joint statement on Thursday, Mali and Algeria said they wanted to relaunch the deal. This is interesting, And what the Algerian Foreign Minister said, Ahmed Attaf, what he said after meeting with the junta in Mali, Assimi Goïta, the one who ousted former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, this Algerian Foreign Minister said, I'll quote him, "We have carried out a very precise, very rigorous examination of what is needed to ensure the effective, productive relaunch via a political process protected from short-term turbulence." And then the spokesperson for the coordination of Azawad movements, these are the movements from this Azawad movement and the Tuareg, all these are found in the northern Mali. So the different groups with competing interest, but all of them are fighting the government, in the central government in Mali, in Bamako. So Azawad movement is one of them. They have to stop sliding further into denial and acknowledge the situation is spiraling out of control. That is what he said. So I don't know. I don't know if it's because now that France is not in Mali anymore, or, Mali removed itself from that G5 of the Sahel that France had created in the countries that have seen extremism activities in West Africa. And since Mali leaving, I think it has created it has created a gap there that has really hampered the effective coming together efforts, from other countries in the fight against extremism. And you can see since this fell apart, there has been an increase in these attacks in this region. So I don't know if this is an alternative that Mali and Algeria is trying to work on, or maybe they're just trying to show France that, really we can do it without you. And one of them is one of the strategies now they're using is to revive these talks by these Tuaregs and these other groups, and see if they can agree on finding a resolution towards this problem that also has continued to displace many people there. So, and speaking about the government wanting to work with militias, which I've always been very skeptical about. And where is that story? I'm trying to look for another story from the United Nations. The United Nations has warned against the same thing that I'm talking about here, and they're saying these ideas of government using militias. Yes. Where was that? Of government using militias could form another insecurity problem. While you think that you're solving one problem, you are creating another problem, and that might be counterproductive in the long run. There's a story on where the UN was calling out the government of Mozambique over the use of militia. I heard that story. I don't know where it went to, but I heard it. I don't remember reading it, but I heard it. But the UN must have lost it. The UN was warning the Mozambican government against the use of militia to fight, the jihadists who are also causing a lot of mayhem in northern part of Mozambique. And they're warning because these fighters especially have caused a lot of trouble to the people, and so the UN is discouraging the Mozambican government to stop using these militias in trying to secure Mozambique or trying to fight these insurgencies. I think I've lost it, but that's okay. We can talk about it some other time, I promise. Okay, but even with that, the activities of Total Energy, I think, will return in that part of the country. France must be very happy. Will return as security has been guaranteed, and so Total Energy will resume its huge natural gas exploitation. There has been some moment of security, I think, with the help of Rwandan forces and other forces. I think they've been able to fight this insurgency to some level, but now that Total has declared that it is ready to resume its operations in that region, what we expect is also a renewed fighting to resume, because outside of just being an extremist attacks or whatever that is happening there in northern Mozambique, we know also there are other competing factors that are also fighting to try and get some control, to try and perhaps discourage Total Energy and other countries that are exploring these areas that is really rich in natural resources and others. And so we shall see perhaps a resumption, a renewed of attacks, I promise you. It has been quiet, but now that Total Energy has declared that it will be resuming its work there in Cabo Delgado, what you will see is a renewed attack. Give it time until they come back and start working. You will see that will happen, because that is also has become a space where geopolitical powers flex their muscles, and a lot of issues and interest and business interest and all that play out also there. in that region. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. It is about 4 minutes past noon here in Nairobi. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you for your time and for watching. Enjoy your weekend, and we can see each other here on Sunday, God willing. Take care. Bye-bye for now.